So the workforce is demanding the performance model, which is what am I worth? Where's my skill sets? I don't want to work more than I have to over those skill sets, which I completely understand. That's what the value in them. And then you have businesses that are performing on the presence model, the very traditional get 40 hours of work in. You have to be in the office. I want to see your status as green. And that's where the conflict is coming in, where we keep addressing the symptoms of manning, but we're not addressing the root cause that people don't want to work like that anymore.
Good morning, HR. I'm Mike Coffey, president of Imperative, bulletproof background checks with fast and friendly service. And this is the podcast where I talk to business leaders about bringing people together to create value for shareholders, customers, and the community. Please follow, rate, and review Good Morning HR wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or at goodmorninghr.com. If there's a single word that describes the zeitgeist of the workforce in 2024, it may be burnout. I see it expressed in online discussion groups, when I'm speaking at conferences, or just when I'm talking to other business leaders. According to a 2023 AFLAC study, 57% of workers rated their burnout as moderate high or very high. This is 9 points higher than reported in 2021. And before you say, just let everyone work remote, studies suggest that burnout may be just as high or even higher for remote employees. To discuss what's causing this burnout, its effect on organizations, and how to address it in your organization is Kelly Bubolz. Kelly is a motivational and professional speaker, author, and trainer with almost 2 decades of strategic leadership in human resources. She owns KB Training Connections, where she works with organizations to engage energy and productivity while preventing burnout. Welcome to Good Morning HR, Kelly.
Good morning.
So when people say they're burned out, I mean, that's like, a thing that is unique to every person, but what are they generally talking about when someone says, I'm burned out?
Yeah, and I definitely know what you're saying there, because there are people that say it when they're stressed. And then there are people that are saying it that it's actually a cry for help. And the big difference is temporary versus chronic. So stress is temporary. You might have a busy week. It might be end of month. It might be your Q4 benefits season. That's temporary. You can get through it and then it's done. Burnout is chronic stress. So you get through benefit season and then it's hiring season. Then it's career fairs. Then it's manning planning. Then you go into turnover and so on and so forth. And we'd keep saying just another quarter. Just another year. We'll get through this. And it doesn't succeed. So that puts us in this survivorship mode. And it gets you into this burnout state in which physically, cognitively, emotionally, and relationships, you start to see the effects. And you start to go down this downward spiral into the darkness.
And it's interesting that you broke that up in quarters, because one of the things, I've owned my business for 25 years, and one of the cycles we're in is that we do our annual planning, but then we have quarterly, full senior staff meetings where we plan out the next quarter. And I'm protective of my people, and so I often overpack my commitments for the quarter to make sure everybody gets the little piece they need of me to do what they do, because it's just a little piece, but there's not that much of me. So I often like right now I'm finding myself saying, okay, well, I was at a conference all week last week. I'm going to Portland later this week for another conference, and then at the end of June I've got 2 weeks of time out for a family trip. How am I going to get all this done? I've just got to get through to the end of the quarter. But I know come July 1st, we're going to have a whole another quarter. And I love what I do, but there are times where even, for somebody who's kind of in charge of their own calendar and their own priorities, I still get that. If not burnout, I'm definitely getting a dark tan.
And I think part of it is exactly what you said is you keep adding more. And you're adding it during a season that doesn't have the capacity to do more. And that's exactly how we burn out, is we've lost this. We might have the passion for what we do, but we're losing the energy because we're not managing it correctly.
Yeah, I think, and we always talk. We've spoken recently several times about emotional intelligence and that self-regulation part. You always think about self-regulation as it relates to other people and how you respond to other people or circumstances. But I think one of especially for me, and I think for a lot of entrepreneurial types, but a lot of high-performing leaders too, the self-regulation of saying no or saying that's not a commitment I can make is a trap we fall into. Anybody who's a people pleaser, and how many times have we heard, if you want to get something done, give it to the busiest person that you know, and they will find a way to get it done. That's probably true, but it probably wears the tread pretty thin on their tires too.
Yeah. And that's why we don't delegate either, is I can just do it faster than myself. I know it's done. I know it's done right. It feels good to get something off your list, but what we're not accounting for is the actual reality that we live in HR, which means, yes, you're in benefit season. Yes, you have strategic planning for manning the next year. But what you're not accounting for is conflict that's coming up in your workforce. What you're not accounting for is turnover that might happen, all those walk-ins and the people in your office. So we're continually stressed by symptoms, but we're not addressing the root cause, which is our own energy management.
And for HR folks like that, the more admin roles, the leadership roles where you've got kind of control over your calendar and all that, I can see us overcommitting or having, and I think often it's a matter of leadership not understanding what's already on our plate, and whoever's being handed this extra task, this extra assignment, not saying, okay, so let's have a conversation around what you want to let slip so that we can get this other thing done. But what about your frontline employees? When we hear, just employees who are, in frontline, hospitality service or on a production line where things haven't really changed. I mean, it seems like they've got a consistent pace of work and the work's coming in usually pretty steadily. What's causing burnout there? Why are those folks? Because there's days where I think, oh wow, that sounds. It would be so nice to spend a week just working on a factory line, just putting slot A and tab A and doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I work across industries. So I'm from manufacturing. That's where my bread and butter come from. Low budgets, low people, sense of chaos, and how do we work through it? But as I got to other industries, hospitality, so we're talking hotels, restaurants, getting to those associations, and I'm finding out it's not that bad in manufacturing. Where it's bad is the service side, because you have communities that are really struggling and they're taking it out on employees. Whereas in more of the business side, there's a sense of professionalism, and you hold each other accountable for that professionalism. In hospitality, you're kind of at the mercy of your customer, and they're getting beat up. And so if I would say, when I go to conferences and work with clients where people are really struggling, is in that hospitality, restaurant business. And then also what you said in the beginning, which was remote workers. So I think it's because there's so much doing that they can never progress. There's so much underwater that they don't feel like they can breathe anymore. And day after day, it's the same thing. Same with remote workers. They're isolated. They're alone. And I think we kind of forgot that they're in this low darkness category, and there hasn't been a lot of support to get them out because they just had to pick up and keep the businesses running. And so when businesses take time for training, for time management, for leadership training, hospitality still has to continue to run. Someone has to service these desks. Someone has to deliver the food. And with the manning shortages, they're on a whole different hurdle game than the rest of us. So it's interesting when you get out to other industries. It's not when you compare yourself to others, I think that the narrative can be very different versus focusing on industry-specific challenges. So when we say people are burnt out, I would say it's very specific to each industry. The industry that I was amazed by was the nonprofit. They have always been in survivorship. They depend on each other. They know what they can afford, what they can't afford, what they have time for, what they don't have time for, and they will always project for interruptions and distractions. So they are very well oiled. And you get out to these other industries that have been put into a sense of chaos with no support, no time to breathe, and they're struggling. So I've taken some tips from the nonprofit industry on communication and collaboration and time management, and I've started applying those to other industries. And it all goes down to what we've been talking about is we're not applying our day and taking control of our week with all the interruptions and distractions that have come into this world. We're acting like it was before.
And so what do you think is that different? I mean, are we talking about all the changes that happened in 2020, or what do you think that change in the workforce and the overall environment is that's leading to this being 9 points higher than it was 2021 when we were all just glad to see people in person and glad to be back at the office for some of us anyway.
I think there's several factors. One is the world is moving faster than it has been. Technology is advancing faster. So you think about, I'm learning Excel. I'm learning this new Excel tip. Now you're learning like a new software every couple months and integrations between software. That's how fast it's moving. The virtual nature of workforces is causing that to move fast as well. You're talking about manning shifts. So because there's so much opportunity, people are moving more than they were before. So you're not looking for a 15-year, 10-year loyal employee. You're looking for how much can I get out of this person in 2 years? But what's interesting is that symptom talk. We're talking about turnover and manning and all the work that goes into it, but we're not addressing the root cause. What do we need that manning for? You're addressing that manning like you have 15 years with them. Instead of addressing the manning like I have 2 years for them, what is their skill set that I'm hiring them for? And that's the shift, and that's that paradigm of HR that gets exhausting is we're trying to move to more of a performance model, and businesses are still approaching it with a presence model. I need 8 hours of work from this person. Do you really need 8 hours, or do you just need these things to be done? So the workforce is demanding the performance model, which is what am I worth? Where's my skill sets? I don't want to work more than I have to over those skill sets, which I completely understand. That's what the value in them. And then you have businesses that are performing on the presence model, the very traditional get 40 hours of work in. You have to be in the office. I want to see your status as green. And that's where the conflict is coming in, where we keep addressing the symptoms of manning, but we're not addressing the root cause that people don't want to work like that anymore.
And I think the technology stuff is a really key point, because I think I used to be the guy in any workplace or in most environments who was on top of all the technology and was the cutting edge kid with all the new ideas and all that. And now I'm lucky enough to have people who do that, and then they're dragging me along sometimes. But just the energy depletion, the cognition depletion of constantly learning new things. And I think it's not just age on my part, even wears me down some. And so when we're asking employees to, we're implementing this AI tool and it's going to feed you this information this much faster, or these tasks that you used to be able to do that would give you a little breathing room maybe. Now, the easy things are getting done for you, and we're just handing you the complex problem. So you're spending a lot more time doing deep work, which, depending on your energy level and what's going on in your life and, and mental cognition and all those things, you may not be able to give that sustained 8-hour, 9-hour effort that you might have if it's broken up with more gentle tasks.
Yeah. And it kind of asks the question, Mike, of where are we spending our time? And I think that's where we're losing energy. When I go in from a third party view, going to organizations, and I ask, what is this person supposed to be working on? You will get 3 different answers from cross departments. That's where the energy is lost, because no matter what one person does, they're not meeting expectations of another person. And so when I go into organizations and I start working on this energy management, we get really aligned and clear about the value each person's skill set is bringing, and we focus on that. And you will start to see that energy start to flow across departments, because everyone has a job instead of just doing a job. And that is the big difference in energy management is, yes, we have to work and we have to pay our bills. We have to run a business. But somehow over the decades, it's lost this passion, this this passion in American businesses of why we do the things we do, the purpose behind it. And we have some smart, talented people coming into the workforce right now, and I see them demanding that. So that's why I try to fight the traditional workforce management and go into this performance model, because it focuses around energy and what people like to do, and then you can shut off because your work is done.
Yeah, and when I was coming, I'm Gen X, and when I was coming up, how I, was whatever the Michael J. Fox movie was, how I was successful in business or whatever. It was that grind culture, that Wall Street culture, and that was really glamorized in the late '80s, early '90s. That always be grinding, and I think there's still a lot of logic to doing that at some level in your 20s when you're young and maybe don't have all the attachments that will stop you from doing that later, to get the skins on the wall, the chinks on your belt or whatever, so that you can move into the positions you want to move in eventually, and so that you're more competitive. But I think more and more, and I've got 3 young adult children who none of whom have embraced the grind culture like my generation did. So I think there may be a difference in expectations maybe between leadership that's Gen X or older, and maybe especially the millennials and Gen Z generation.
Yeah. And you're going to continue to see that generational shift because they saw their parents just working and grinding and exhausted. And that's how I grew up, and that's how I burnt out as well, is that productivity guilt. You can't take a nap. That's lazy. That's a big waste of time. Work validation. If you're not working and providing value and earning every single dollar, what are you doing? So I would fill any space instead of providing just maybe more quality work. I would just fill it. And I just wanted high output of production at all points in time. And eventually I burnt out. And you see that a lot with HR people, probably because they're people pleasers, is that if I have time, I'm going to fill it. And sometimes you just need to give yourself time to think and back up for a second and go to conferences and network with your HR community and listen to Good Morning HR and expand your mind in our own trade. And I see this in my local SHRM chapter as well, as people leave halfway because they have to go back to work. And it's a learning moment of the month to expand your HR skill set. And I was that too. There's no judgment there. But then I realized when you back up and give that space, you actually are providing higher quality value of work. You really find your purpose of what HR brings to the table. You get a seat at the table. You know how to find so much value in the outcome that you can get a budget for training instead of just doing. And I think that whole saying of we are human beings, we're not human doers, we're not human robots, is really important in this energy management framework that I talk about, because we're just doing things to do things. Is it really providing a value?
Okay, so I got to ask, what's your home SHRM chapter?
Fox Valley in Appleton, Wisconsin.
Shout out to Fox Valley SHRM. Okay, good. I'm on the Texas State Council here in Texas, and SHRM is my favorite group in the world. So they do a lot of good. But you're right. I talk to other HR professionals here in town, and I speak at a lot of conferences, and people will say, especially when I'm speaking at a SHRM luncheon or at a conference, somebody will say, I'm going to have to step out the last 15 minutes to go make a phone call or something like that. And they can't even get away. And I think it seems that many employers are increasingly resistant to allowing their employees, it's not just lunch. It's 30 or 40 minutes beforehand, 40 minutes after to, for travel and whatever else. And employers aren't, in some cases, they don't seem to be seeing the value of that engagement with your peers, of that education, and maybe that disconnect. And I think, especially with your non-exempt population, the idea that a lot of employers and maybe a lot of non-exempt employees still have this idea that I gotta be, if I'm on the clock and they're paying me, this isn't a job where I can just go home early and still get paid if when I get everything done. And so with a non-exempt employee, or in that employee base that's non-exempt, how would you suggest an employer change their mindset to help reduce that burnout feeling from those employees.
Yeah. And I felt that. It's that presence again, presence over performance. And I think with anything, and I just worked with a client with their salespeople because they were gone a lot for conferences. I said, what's the objective of them being at these trade shows? And they're like, can't really answer that. And that's what kind of triggered me to think, okay, if I'm an HR person, I can't get out. They gave me a membership, but I can't get out for events, or I have to leave at the event, or my laptop's open during the event, which is common in my group.
Right.
What is the objective of you being there? And then are you giving space for this HR person or anyone when they get back to your organization to present that material, because other people can learn off of that. Mm-hmm. And when you get out of those cinder block walls, when you get out of that remote work and you get into that community, that's where ideas thrive, and that's where that energy exchange happens. And so that's probably what I would say is, what is the intent of you attending, and who can you present that to when you get back?
That's good, yeah. And that the take back is, and that's a different kind of mental engagement for those roles, and something that you can only, sharpen the saw a little bit by having to, teach it, but also to engage with your peers in a different way. And let's take a quick break. Good Morning HR is brought to you by Imperative, bulletproof background checks with fast and friendly service. For many employers, any review of a candidate's social media profile is taboo. That is a privacy line they are simply unwilling to cross. But within the confines of Title VII and other anti-discrimination laws, a candidate's off-duty conduct, including how they conduct themselves on social media, may be relevant. For example, if the employee engages in illegal or negligent conduct on the job that might have been predictable and therefore preventable, had the employer simply reviewed the publicly available information about them on the internet, the plaintiff's lawyers will certainly be using that information in a negligent hiring suit. For some positions, threatening, coercive, or bigoted online behavior may be a legitimate concern. In other instances, references to personal drug use or criminal behavior may be relevant. Imperative helps clients conduct necessary online due diligence while building guardrails around the process to ensure that irrelevant or potentially discriminatory information isn't provided to decision makers. You can learn more about the many ways Imperative helps our clients make well-informed decisions about the people they involve in their business at imperativeinfo.com. If you're an HRCI or SHRM certified professional, this episode of Good Morning HR has been pre-approved for 1/2 hour of recertification credit. To obtain the recertification information, visit goodmorninghr.com and click on Research Credits. Then select episode 151 and enter the keyword Burnout. That's BURNOUT. And now back to my conversation with Kelly Bubolz. What do you think the main, just to clarify, what do you think the cost to business or to the organization is from this burnout?
Well, I know Gallup's research has said 30% of someone's salary is your turnover costs in the white collar professions, even more if it's a leader. It's because if a leader leaves, it is more likely that team members leave. I think with the shift of the workforce going from tenure to that 2-year time frame, we're not really capturing people's true value in that 2 years, thinking we have more time. So I think it's more than 30%. And that's what I've trained some HR peers on for getting training budgets, because they get maybe a $5,000 budget for 50 leaders for the whole year that haven't gotten trained in 5 years. It's doable. Is it effective? Probably not. And I told them, what if one of those leaders leaves? What happens? Calculate that. Calculate your cost of hire, how much training and onboarding and recruitment cost goes into that, how much time you're spending on that. And you'll see budgets appear that we should address it as a preventative instead of a reactive to a disciplinary situation. And I think that approach puts, money and numbers to the table in which businesses understand.
Yeah, and I've had this conversation with HR consulting clients over the years. Let's say your average tenure is 2 years. The raw value of turning that to 3 years is gigantic. Mm-hmm. And then if you can keep well beyond that, that's even better. But just that 50% increase in somebody's tenure has giant dollar value to it, both on the productivity side, the institutional knowledge building side, and transfer, and just the raw cost of replacing that person just being deferred is really high. So so we want to fix the problem. We see the problem. We've got employees who aren't as productive as they could be because they've just got this mental fatigue. They're not as engaged. They're probably not as cooperative with their fellow employees, and it's it's probably eroding the team. So we want to fix that. What is as a leader in an organization, from the CEO, across the C-suite, what should we be paying attention to, and what kind of processes ought we be putting in place to alleviate some of the burnout and do whatever we need to build that energy back up in the workforce?
Yeah, and I'm going to address past the onboarding, new hire training side, and where people are actually producing work and bringing value back to the organization. I would say the focus would be on time management. What are they working on that provides the most value? Everything else is noise and distraction. If there's time, great. Otherwise, automate it, systemize it. It doesn't need to be here anymore, especially with the technology that's available. Cross-department communication would be the other one. So much time is wasted by bitter banter, back and forth. I can't find files. Someone has files in 3 different places. Again, all wasted time. And this is what gets exhausting as human beings, is you're spending all this decision making in a fatigue state of just searching for information. So clarity in that time management, what are people supposed to be working on, brings so much life back to your organization. And that sounds simple, but it's kind of these octopus arms that you start diving into and find out all the noise that's going on in your organization. But all that noise is causing the energy to be wasted instead of used in working the business.
So making sure employees are doing those things that are their highest and best purpose and use of their skills. And then you called it communication, but we've got an organizational file management system, right? And everybody complies with it except for me. And it causes grief because, I know I created this file. I was on the airplane and I wrote this blog post that we were going to put up. And now it could be in half a dozen different places on my computer or on the cloud someplace. And that's a self-discipline problem. But I can imagine, and we've got 22 employees, but I can imagine in a much larger organization, just a few people like me would create chaos in trying to find the files, get the information I need, have it formatted, and all of those things that, like you say, take time. And that's why we have processes, and that's why we have standards of product and stuff. But just trying to get everybody on the same page in a larger organization takes a lot more planning.
Yeah. And really just less is more. There's so much noise, and everyone should be in alignment with what we should be working on, what we're working towards, what we're spending time on, what is our side project list, and it should be checked in often and aligned across departments. And this all came from, Mike, a project that I worked on with a machine group, and we had high turnover, high safety costs, and I asked them if I could just watch them for 2 hours. And there was so much time wasted finding tools, cleaning up lubricant over and over again because the machine was broken. And I would not work there for 15 minutes. And these gentlemen were working there for 12 hours a day. And it cleared a lot for me to say, sometimes we don't have the right tools, right file locations, that's where our energy is going instead of actually providing value back. So we can focus on the drainers, or we can focus on the energizers. The drainers will work themselves out.
Yeah, so making sure things work like they're supposed to, that everybody knows what their role is, and using technology. And I've got presentations. In fact, we've got a webinar that was on the day that this podcast is released, was yesterday, on the ethical and practical uses of AI in HR. And I think that's going to be, as much as there's a lot of fear around that, I think it's generally going to be a really positive thing because it's going to free especially your HR reps, your HR generalists, and your business partners up to do the things that they do best, the things that bring the most value to the organization, and take away a lot, especially once we have great AI that can do employee self-service and those kinds of things. So those same questions that you answer over and over again, and, if an employee can hit a chat bot that gives them the right answer without picking up the phone, and they can do it at 7:00 on a Saturday night if they need the answer, those things are going to make a giant difference in the HR world. And I can imagine across almost, especially in the office environment, the impact of AI is going to be generally that kind of positivity. I think we're a long way from, people losing their jobs. I just think their jobs are going to change dramatically, probably for the best.
Yeah, I agree. There's some local companies that are moving to, I don't want to say cloud-based HR, but hub HR groups, but all they're moving is your general basic functions. So payroll questions, where do I find my W-2? Those type of things are being shifted, which is the noise, the energy drainers, so that we can work on people management and performance management and student programs. And I think that's fantastic because that's the noise that's going away.
Yeah, that'll be perfect. So any last thoughts on the macro workforce as how we approach them as organizations to help alleviate this burnout, or things that maybe just individuals ought to be doing besides, we talked about, paying attention to their own time management?
Yeah, I think that the best option would be to do a brainstorm session in which you would if you would wash the slate clean, what would you have your people working on that would support the business? And then everything else you place thereafter, and you will see the energy return. Because it's the noise, it's the energy drainers that is dragging us all down. And this world will keep changing. This world will keep going. Stress has been here. Stress will always be. You won't fix that. But I think it's what we work on for those 40 hours a week or remotely that will make or break why you stay with the company, make or break why you stay in HR, why you don't stay in HR. And I want to guide people through that energy management because we got into these passions for a reason. It's the noise that came in and started draining us.
So it's really kind of Stephen Covey's that whole concept of the big rocks first, and the small rocks will fill in around it.
Yeah,
that's great. Well, and it goes back to timeless classics, wisdom that we've known but haven't always incorporated into our lives the way we should. We've maybe lost track of some of that. Well, thank you, Kelly. That's all the time we have, but I really appreciate you joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And thank you for listening. You can comment on this episode or search our previous episodes at goodmorninghr.com or on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. And don't forget to follow us wherever you get your podcast. Rob Upchurch is our technical producer, and you can reach him at robmakespods.com. And thank you to Imperative's marketing coordinator, Marianne Hernandez, who keeps the trains running on time. And I'm Mike Coffey. As always, don't hesitate to reach out if I can be of service to you personally or professionally. I'll see you next week, and until then, be well, do good, and keep your chin up.